Incredible moment, CEO's seat stolen, flight grounded. Discover the touching truth behind it. Sarah felt the weight of expectation as the day of the corporate flight approached. It was more than just a trip, it was an opportunity to secure a deal that could change her family's life. She had dreamt of a better future, one forged by her grit, not by connections. Yet every working day, she watched as some of her colleagues, particularly those like Tom, a junior executive with family ties to the CEO, strutted up the corporate ladder as if it were a fashion show. Her chest tightened with frustration as she poured every ounce of energy into her work, supporting her single mother, who had sacrificed so much for her education, and her younger brother, Jake, who had just graduated high school with aspirations of college. As she prepared for the flight, this profound mixture of hope and anxiety churned within her. How could she rise above her own insecurities and claim her power in a world so often dictated by privilege? Her heart raced as she pictured an ambitious future for Jake, free from the burdens she carried. But as she moved through her tasks, she overheard an unsettling rumor: Tom had taken the CEO's seat on the plane, without permission. The sheer arrogance of it left her fuming, a flicker of rage igniting in her chest. What gives him the right? She questioned internally while keeping a professional veneer. Confronting Tom could cost her the precarious job security she had worked so hard for. Visions of her financial struggles, the bills piling up, and her family's sacrifices surged in her mind. She hesitated, caught between the urge to stand up for herself and the fear of losing everything. As the day unfolded, chaos erupted when the flight was grounded due to unforeseen technical difficulties. Executives clamored for answers, the atmosphere thick with tension and uncertainty. Sarah could feel the tightness in her throat as she stood in the center of it all, hearing the whispers of worry and frustration. This pivotal moment was not only a test of her resolve but a challenge to confront Tom without risking everything. What if she chose to speak up? Would it lead to a breakthrough, or would it destroy her career? Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. As the executives fumed, Sarah's resolve began to solidify. The anger she felt toward Tom morphed into a burning need to shine a light on unearned privilege, to advocate for those whose talents were often overlooked. She spotted Mr. Johnson, an elder board member known for his integrity. She locked eyes with him, the intensity of the moment crashing over her like a tidal wave. Her voice quivered as she began to speak truthfully about the company's values, laying bare her vision for a merit-based system rather than one governed by family connections. But in the fleeting moments before she could cement her argument, the lights flickered ominously. Whispers of layoffs, the threat of impending job loss, wafted through the crowd, compounding her internal turmoil. Would she find the support she needed to confront the powerful forces against her? As she felt her heart seize with determination, a haunting realization settled in her mind: can integrity triumph in a world that often rewards the unjust? The unresolved tension lingered heavily in the air, as Sarah stood on the precipice of her own moral reckoning. Sarah stood in the crowd, the air thick with unease and uncertainty. All around her, murmurs of doubt spiraled like a whirlwind, fueling the anxiety that knotted her stomach. But amid the chaos, a flicker of determination ignited inside her, a defiance against the unearned advantages she had witnessed too often. She inhaled deeply, committing to the conviction that had taken root within her. As executives paced like caged animals, Sarah realized that the grounded flight presented an unexpected opportunity. The company's future, still suspended in the balance, hung on the edges of the integrity and transparency she dared to voice. With a clarity she'd never experienced before, she rejected the instinct to remain invisible, deciding now was the time to act. "Mr. Johnson," she called out, her voice stronger than she anticipated, cutting through the din of disgruntled executives. He turned towards her, eyebrows raised, acknowledging her presence amidst the turmoil. I believe we need to discuss the implications of what just happened. This situation isn't just about the flight, it's about our entire ethos as a company. The moment felt electric. Other executives paused, their curiosity piqued. Sarah steeled herself, heart pounding, as she articulated her thoughts. She squared her shoulders, grounding herself. It's vital that we enforce a culture of meritocracy and hold ourselves accountable. The perception of favoritism undermines employee morale. Her words seemed to hang in the air, suspended by an unspoken fear that reverberated through everyone present. Would they agree, or would they dismiss her as just another employee without the right connections? Tom, sensing a threat to his position, moved closer, his smirk barely concealing derision. Really, Sarah? You think now's the time? We should be focusing on fixing the flight situation, not discussing policies that have nothing to do with reality. His tone dripped with condescension, and the heart of every grievance she held against him surged to the forefront. The taunt teetered on the edge of her resolve. Actually, Tom, it's everything to do with reality, she fired back, emboldened. If we continue accepting favoritism over ability, we're setting ourselves up for failure, and that's a risk I'm not willing to accept for this company. A ripple of surprise panned through the gathered crowd. Some executives exchanged glances, and Sarah caught the eyes of a few colleagues who shared her frustrations. But a looming presence remained, the skepticism clung heavily. In that moment, her mind raced through the implications. Was it wise to confront Tom head-on? The risk of retaliation was palpable, yet so was the chance to inspire change however small it may be. It was a daunting choice, but something deep within her urged her forward. Whatever you've gained simply by your last name is no match for talent and hard work. For the first time, she leaned into her feelings rather than shunning them. The anger wasn't just personal, it was the spark she needed to ignite transformative dialogue. Then, without warning, the tension escalated. The lights flickered once more, and the murmurs of layoffs grew louder, pressing upon her like an oppressive weight. Would her words lead to a shift, or would they reinforce the status quo? As Mr. Johnson's thoughtful expression indicated he was listening, Sarah felt hope mix with dread. Today, she faced more than Tom or the executives, she faced her own future, a world where her voice could matter in a cacophony of privilege. But before she could delve deeper into her argument or hope for a supportive consensus, a shadow loomed behind her, the lead COO, notorious for his hardline stance against dissent. Are you making accusations, Sarah? He asked, his tone dangerously low. The association of his needing to remind her of her place sent her heart racing, questioning her next move. Would she reveal her fears, or would she solidify her stance against the traditional dynamics of power? The moment felt frayed, teetering on the edge of a decisive confrontation that would define her career. As the world around her felt eerily quiet, she realized the stakes were higher than she had anticipated. Her next words would determine the course of the day and perhaps her future. Panic surged through Sarah as she confronted the COO's piercing gaze, challenging her resolve. Time slowed as she felt the weight of her colleagues watching, every breath of silence amplifying the tension. She was standing on the precipice of a professional breakthrough or a catastrophic misstep. Her instincts screamed to retreat, but an inner voice urged her to stand firm. No, Sarah said, her voice laced with a calm that surprised even her. I'm not making accusations. I'm advocating for a change that could save us from ourselves. We're on the brink of a significant crisis, and we need to hold ourselves accountable before it's too late. The COO's expression hardened, but there was a flicker of something else, curiosity, perhaps. He leaned closer, lowering his voice. Be careful, Sarah. You're overstepping. The warning hung in the air, an implicit threat threaded with the fear of being ostracized. Yet the deeper she dug into her convictions, the more resolve bolstered her confidence. Standing there, exposed but alive with significance, she began to see herself as a crucial component of the company's narrative rather than a mere background character. "I'm willing to take that risk," she replied, heart pounding yet steady. "Because if we don't change our approach to talent and recognition, we risk everything we've built here." There were murmurs among the executives. Instead of hostility, she sensed palpable tension as her colleagues considered her words. Even Tom seemed taken aback, his mockery momentarily displaced by uncertainty. The tide appeared to be shifting, and with it came a wave of audacity. With the newly ignited spark in her voice, she continued, "We can implement better criteria for performance reviews, ensuring that every employee is recognized for their contributions instead of their connections. Leaving favoritism unchecked is a disservice not only to the organization but also to those who truly work for their successes." It had taken years for Sarah to find the courage to voice these sentiments publicly, and in this room filled with authority, the fear of backlash began to diminish. Her mind raced with the understanding that she could influence policy, that her voice could become a catalyst for change. A future without the shadow of Tom and his ilk felt possible. The COO's stance softened slightly as curiosity morphed into contemplation. "Advocating for meritocracy is commendable, but have you considered the potential fallout?" he asked, his voice less menacing and more inquisitive. "Every system experiences fallout when challenged," she replied, her confidence rising with every word. "But stasis is stagnation, and stagnation leads to failure. Isn't that worse?" A silence enveloped the room, thick with the potential for change. Sarah held her breath, waiting for a response that could either shatter her resolve or reinforce her burgeoning empowerment. Then, unexpectedly, Mr. Johnson spoke up, his voice steady and authoritative. "I think Sarah has a point, but we need a structured approach. This requires careful consideration." He glanced at Tom, who had paled as the tide shifted, "and it's time we examined our values in light of today's realities." Sarah's heart raced, a wave of hope surged within her. This was the moment she had been waiting for, a chance to bring about the change she believed in. But as alliances shifted and her confidence grew, so did the lurking fear of retaliation. The road ahead seemed paved with possibilities, yet uncertainty hung heavily above her. As the executive team began discussing the recommendations for a reformed review system, Sarah felt the familiar gnawing anxiety creep back. Would she become an outcast for challenging the status quo, or would she be remembered as the voice of reason in a room full of privilege? Her phone buzzed abruptly, interrupting her line of thought. A notification flashed on her screen, an anonymous message: "Careful who you cross. There's more at stake than you think." The warning stung, it eclipsed the newfound optimism that had started to blossom. The shadows of intimidation still loomed, and her journey had only just begun. At that moment, Sarah knew she would have to prepare for the inevitable pushback, a confrontation that could very well disrupt her progress. The stakes were higher than ever, and as she glanced around the room, the reality of her situation struck hard. The time had come not just to face her peers but to stand her ground against the very system she now dared to challenge. Would her newfound power be enough to withstand the challenges ahead? The game was changing, and it was now up to her to navigate the treacherous waters that lay in wait. The weeks following the board meeting were a roller coaster of adrenaline and anxiety for Sarah, each day a reminder of the precipice upon which she stood. At first, it felt as if a storm had broken loose. The discussions generated by her advocacy echoed throughout the company, inciting both fervent support and vehement resistance. Each time she walked into the office, the air crackled with tension. She was no longer just Sarah from marketing, she was a potential threat to the old guard, an emergent force with enough clout to destabilize the ingrained order. Despite the risk, the changes she had proposed were gaining traction. Employees were beginning to speak up about the flawed evaluation system, emboldened by her boldness. But the praise she received from colleagues came with an unsettling realization: her solitary stance against favoritism had painted a target on her back. Late-night emails from Tom, laced with sarcasm and subtle threats, were becoming frequent. He was retaliating in a way calculated to undermine her credibility, reflecting his desperation to maintain control. One morning, Sarah arrived early, hoping to formulate a strategy for her team, a plan that would marry her vision with the structured approach Mr. Johnson had suggested. As she combed through reports, she was struck by her sudden impatience. The patterns at play were all too clear. If the system didn't change, her calls for reform would fizzle out like sparks in the wind. It was when she noticed the shuffling of feet and whispered conversations in the break room that a sense of foreboding washed over her. The brewing discord was palpable. The conversation she had ignited needed nurturing, but would it be at the cost of her safety? That same afternoon, while presenting her proposal to Mr. Johnson and a few supportive colleagues, Sarah was relentless in championing change. Words flowed with an intensity that drew everyone in, casting aside the lingering specter of intimidation. Yet, as she laid out her induction plan for new review criteria, a sudden noise distracted her, a door slamming shut. Panic rushed through her momentarily until she recognized it was only Tom, storming away after an exchange with an executive who had voiced support for her initiative. "That's your opposition taking a stand against the tide," Mr. Johnson remarked, noticing her momentary distraction. "You're making waves, Sarah." "Waves," she repeated, contemplatively, "or ripples?" Her heart was racing, a sense of power igniting as she realized her own capacity to influence change was not merely confined to her voice, it lay in the collective response her ideas were garnering. However, just as clarity broke through the haze of fear, the anonymous message flashed back into her thoughts: "Careful who you cross." Those words gnawed at her. Trust was fleeting in this environment. The deeper she ventured into this transformative journey, the more she realized her allies were just as precarious as her opponents. That evening, Sarah returned to her apartment feeling caught in a web of complex relationships. She needed resilience, but would it come from within or from the colleagues who had stepped up to support her? When she glanced into the mirror, she was surprised by the resolve in her own eyes, a reflection of someone who had finally come into her own. Her mind raced with solutions, a way to solidify her base of support, clarify her mission, and perhaps, even gain insights from her opposition. Determined, she opened her laptop and began drafting an open invitation for a brainstorming session, one meant to align her team around objectives not just her own. Her fingers danced over the keys, crafting a message that promoted unity while subtly inviting dissent. Yet as she pressed send, a new anxiety coursed through her. Would this connect her with like-minded colleagues, or would it singularly isolate her within the network of whispers? The risk was harrowing, and with it, uncertainty returned to haunt her. With a deep breath, she understood the stakes. This was no longer just about changing one aspect of their corporate culture, it was about defining who she was going to be in this landscape. Would she take the plunge into conflict with conviction, or become a mere footnote in the annals of the company she had challenged? The waiting began, punctuated only by the ticking clock that felt as if it were counting down to a revelation or a reckoning. One thing was clear: she was prepared to face whatever emerged next, but was her team ready to stand beside her when true confrontation arrived? A message pinged in response, lighting up her screen, a simple reply, enigmatic yet charged with potential: "You might want to rethink your approach, Sarah. Not everyone will play nice." The following morning, the atmosphere in the office had shifted, palpable with a sense of urgency that Sarah hadn't expected. As she navigated through the bustling hallways, heads turned, whispers fluttered away like startled birds as she passed. Her heart thudded in her chest, a drumbeat of anticipation and trepidation. The response to her invitation had been both an olive branch and a gauntlet thrown at her feet. Her curiosity piqued, Sarah entered the conference room where the brainstorming session was to take place. The walls were lined with whiteboards, their surfaces freshly wiped, ready to capture ideas. She took a deep breath, steadying herself against the weight of expectations. Would the camaraderie she hoped to foster materialize, or would this be another battleground? To her surprise, several colleagues had already gathered. Chuck, a quiet but insightful team member, nodded at her as she entered, signaling solidarity. Elaine, always the skeptic, eyed her with guarded interest, while others exchanged subtle glances that betrayed both excitement and skepticism about what was to unfold. "Thank you all for coming," Sarah began, her voice steady despite the simmering tension. "I know we're navigating through uncertainty, and that's exactly why I wanted us to come together. We need to develop a structure for evaluations that is fair and transparent. I believe every voice here matters, and I'm committed to including all perspectives in this process." The room buzzed, her words igniting passionate responses. Ideas flowed, some encouraging, others critical, but most importantly, a conversation was taking shape, a conversation that dared to challenge the status quo. Yet, lurking beneath the surface, discontent brewed. Tom's absence felt almost heavier than his presence would have. As the session progressed, she could feel the old guard's instincts rearing their heads. Elaine challenged her openly, questioning the feasibility of any changes. With every probing question, Sarah considered her words carefully. This was not merely resistance, it was a test of her abilities to navigate dissent gracefully. "I appreciate your concern, Elaine," Sarah replied evenly. "But creativity often thrives in chaos. What if we looked at our current issues not as obstacles, but as opportunities for growth?" The dialogue shifted as Chuck weighed in with an insightful analysis, his voice firm yet gentle. Encouraged by her colleague's burgeoning willingness to engage, Sarah felt a flicker of hope. Yet, doubt crept in when she recalled the ominous motivational message left the night before. Was her tactic effective, or would it lead her straight into deeper conflict? When the meeting closed, the atmosphere was charged with possibility. Several team members approached Sarah, offering support, and for a brief moment, she felt emboldened. But the murmur of concern about Tom's looming presence remained. Would he retaliate against those who dared to stand beside her? As she walked to her desk, her phone buzzed again. Another anonymous message, this time more threatening. "You think they will have your back? You'll see they're not true allies. Trust only yourself." A shiver darted down her spine. The isolation that had once felt invigorating now began to suffocate her. Determined not to let fear shackle her ambitions, Sarah recognized that she needed to find a strategy to confront Tom directly. The tension was building. This was a turning point. She had to take control of her narrative and dismantle whatever threats lurked in the shadows. The office clock ticked louder as her resolve solidified. Her voice needed to rise above the whispers, to forge new paths. The time had come to face the reality of her situation. Who would truly support her in this battle, and what price would she pay to reclaim her narrative? As she sat at her desk, a thought lodged itself in her mind: confronting Tom was inevitable. She would not just be defined by her challenges but would shape her identity through them. Her hand trembled slightly as she opened a new message to Tom. This would be the first step into confrontation. With her heart racing, she typed, "Let's talk. It's time we addressed the real issues." Sarah's heart raced as her message to Tom hovered in the digital ether. A tightness coiled in her stomach, a blend of anticipation and uncertainty. She had opened the door to confrontation, yet doubts crept in. Would he respond with hostility, or was there a chance he might engage constructively? Each beep of her phone felt like a countdown to her imminent reckoning. Minutes dragged into an eternity. She couldn't focus on her work, not when the specter of Tom loomed large in her mind. Would he dismiss her attempt to engage as petty, or would he recognize the moment for what it was, a chance to pivot? She clenched her jaw, forcing herself to breathe steadily. This wasn't just a meeting, it was a test of her will and determination to define her professional landscape. Finally, a response pinged through. "I don't see what there is to discuss. Maybe the team should focus on their evaluations instead of your little brainstorm. Let's keep it to business." The sarcastic undertone sent ripples of anger through her, yet the response was predictable. Tom thrived in the chaos of threats and ambiguity. He hoped to sow doubt, to maintain the upper hand. It was time for her to shift the narrative, move forward rather than retreat. She typed back, her fingers steady now. This is about more than evaluations, Tom. I believe we can create a better environment for everyone. I want to work together." She hit send and felt the tension in her shoulders relax, at least momentarily. It was a move towards transparency rather than escalation. After all, battling Tom might require strategy more than aggression. When the bell signaled the start of the next hour, she decided to further solidify her position. Transformation was not only in the air, it was her responsibility now. She needed to ensure her colleagues shared in this vision. "Team meeting," she called, gathering those who had shown support. Chuck, Elaine, and a few others filed into the small meeting room, the atmosphere thick with an undercurrent of anticipation. Approaching the front like a conductor preparing for an orchestra, Sarah plastered a confident smile on her face, though her pulse raced beneath the surface. "We have to prepare for whatever pushback might come our way after my exchange with Tom," she began. Their reactions varied, curiosity danced with apprehension in their eyes. "Change isn't easy, but it's necessary. What if we brainstorm strategies to solidify support among the team? We need to present a unified front. We will not bend quietly." As ideas flew across the table, different views intersecting and colliding, Sarah felt the invigoration of teamwork. Chuck suggested creating an anonymous feedback system to gather opinions and concerns without fear. Elaine proposed a series of workshops aimed at fostering better communication and morale. The more they spoke, the more Sarah emerged as a leader, a transformation she hadn't anticipated. Ideas were pooled, and laughter began to ripple through the conversations. This began to feel less like an uphill battle and more like a shared journey toward empowerment. But as their ideas burgeoned, so did the tension in knowing Tom would not remain passive. Would he take revenge? The whispers of doubt grew ever stronger. Sarah realized she not only needed to prepare for the confrontation but also to strengthen her position with actionable practices that could turn their initial fear into resilience. The meeting concluded on a high note, yet the impending clash with Tom loomed larger than ever. The threat of his retaliation echoed ominously in her mind. She was taking strides, but was she ready for the fallout? As she looked around the room, the warmth of shared ideas buoyed her spirits. She had forged connections that would not easily break, allies were emerging. Yet, the specter of betrayal remained. The quest for support was far from over, and she steeled herself for what lay ahead. Sitting back down at her desk, she contemplated her next steps. It was more than just navigating the office politics, it was about discovering who she was becoming amid challenge and adversity. The path ahead would lead her deeper into the fray. A new message pinged, this time from Chuck. "Are you prepared for whatever Tom dishes out?" It was just the question she needed. She took a deep breath, ready to plan her next move and answer not just with words but with united strength. As she replied, Sarah realized the full weight of her journey lay directly ahead. Her transformation into a protagonist capable of standing her ground was just beginning. Could she truly confront Tom and emerge victorious? The hours following the meeting were a mix of adrenaline and reflection for Sarah. She had ignited a spark of unity among her colleagues, yet the flicker of concern about Tom's potential retaliation remained a heavy weight on her chest. The thrill of newfound camaraderie was overshadowed by the ominous shadow of confrontation. Balancing her tasks felt like walking a tightrope. She juggled the demands of her regular work while strategizing about Tom's likely next move. It was a delicate dance, one where her mind oscillated between the responsibilities of her own role and the emerging leadership she was embracing. In the corner of her office, a whiteboard brimming with ideas from the meeting teased her visual sense. Sarah approached it, scanning each phrase she had written during that session. Anonymous feedback, workshops for communication, support strategies. She felt determination blossoming within her. It was more than just addressing Tom. It was building a culture that could withstand future adversities. She picked up a marker and drew 2 columns, Tom's tactics and our responses. As she filled in the left side with bullet points of Tom's likely psychological maneuvers, she felt a shift within herself. She was no longer simply reacting to his aggression, she was now proactively defining their response. Each entry on the right side crystallized into a battle plan strategies that would rally her coworkers rather than allow them to scuttle under Tom's oppressive tactics. With newfound clarity, she crafted a simple email to her teammates, inviting them to another session for more in-depth planning. She felt a surge of purpose. Her journey was firmly taking shape. This would require her to be the courageous architect of their future. But the thought of Tom's reaction loomed. If he was anything like his history, he would not take her initiative lightly. Detangling the layers of office politics would be no small feat, yet the sense of fear was not paralyzing, rather, it pushed her forward. The external chaos was only reinforcing her internal resolve. As she walked back to her desk after sending the email, she felt eyes on her. Chuck, stationed a few desks away, caught her gaze and grinned. "You're on fire, Sarah. I can feel the shift. We've got your back." The warmth in his voice bolstered her spirits, even as doubts whispered at the edges of her subconscious. Their camaraderie reinforced her commitment. She began to realize that her quest wasn't solely about resisting Tom, it was about cultivating empowerment and resilience in herself and her team. Growth came not only from success but also from facing adversity together. The deeper she immersed herself into the complexities of their professional dynamic, the clearer the outlines of her own leadership began to emerge. Late that afternoon, when fatigue began to set in, Sarah received another message, this time from Elaine. "Have you thought about how we can frame our proposals? The way we present them can make all the difference." Her pulse quickened at the thought. This wasn't merely about what they would say, it was about how they would say it. She envisioned the room filled with their peers, their ideas more than just words on a slide. This became her next focus, rewriting their narrative not just for the pitch, but for the entire team to believe they belonged to something larger. Suddenly, a thought struck her: what if Tom underestimated their collective strength? Would he expect her to engage in a face-off he believed she would lose? Determination solidified into a singular thought: she was prepared to turn the tide. As she drafted responses and empowerment strategies, she couldn't shake the feeling that the time was approaching for a definitive moment. The conflict was no longer just personal for her, it had morphed into a test of their collective resolve. Would they endure and rise together, or would they fragment under the weight of Tom's aggression? As the day transitioned to evening and the office grew quieter, Sarah gathered her thoughts. The pieces were in motion. Her colleagues were no longer just supporters, they were collaborators. The call to action would soon echo through the office like a thunderclap. Her phone chimed once more, another message, this time from an unknown number, with a cryptic subject line: "The game has changed." She hesitated, uncertainty creeping in as she wondered what revelations awaited her. Could this be the catalyst for what came next, a twist that could either fortify their resolve or plunge them into a darker confrontation? As Sarah stared at her phone, the weight of uncertainty grew heavier. The message pricked at her resolve, thoughts spiraling as she considered the implications. The game has changed. What did that mean? It could be a veiled threat or a strategic warning. Her instincts nudged her towards caution. Preparing for Tom's next move required a keen awareness of every new turn. In a sudden flash of determination, she leveraged her uncertainty as fuel. If Tom was brewing something underhanded, responding with calculated actions could unsettle him. She closed her eyes for a moment, mentally drafting the scenario while inhaling steadiness. Complex nuances filled the air, waiting to be unraveled. Hers was not just a response to this message but an opportunity to broaden her leadership presence. She snatched her notepad and started jotting down potential impacts of Tom's stereotypical maneuvers. She saw his reflexive tactics, condescension, manipulation of the narrative, or outright aggression when threatened. Each element she dissected further fueled the urgency bubbling within her. The desire to emerge not as a target but as a formidable figure ignited her ambition. With the newfound clarity of purpose, she promptly organized the next meeting. Her colleagues needed to be prepared, not only about the proposals, but also about standing unified against Tom's tactics. She envisioned a session devoted to mental resilience, teaching her team to fortify confidence in themselves and each other. It was crucial. A united front remained their most potent weapon. Later that evening, the bustling office quieted, yet Sarah's mind raced. The whiteboard, still adorned with the team's collaborative notes, reminded her of their collective potential. She filled it with more strategies and self-affirmations, using colored markers that portrayed optimism. Left empty-handed in terms of fears, she now focused solely on assembling a response that could become a narrative powerhouse. When she finally stepped out for a late dinner, her heart thrummed with anticipation. However, fragments of the cryptic message lingered in her thoughts. She scrolled through her contacts, considering who could shed light on the enigma. Her breath caught upon reading the name of a former colleague, Jack, who had left under distressing circumstances. Could he know something? Or perhaps, he had insights into Tom's recent behavioral patterns. Her pulse quickened as she remembered Jack's directness. Could his perspective be the missing piece? Gaining insight from someone who understood both the office dynamics and Tom's mind would be invaluable. Without hesitating, Sarah composed a text asking him for coffee, hinting at the urgency behind her request. As she put her phone away, she realized she was stepping into a territory that compelled her to confront her own fears. Pursuing the truth meant risking exposure, both for herself and her ideas. But the alternative of remaining in ignorance loomed darker still. She could feel the balance tipping, her stakes rising with every decision she made. When she arrived home, the lingering question of Tom and the cryptic message compelled her to reflect on her motivations. Empowerment, resilience, and courage. These were not simply idealistic goals, they were necessities for her survival in this workplace arena. She felt a distinct shift in her mindset. No longer an isolated warrior, she was nurturing an entire battalion. As she drifted into restless sleep, she believed the following day would bring revelations that could change the trajectory of her journey. But what if Jack had insights that led to deeper troubles instead? Would confronting the shadows from her office expose confounding truths or solidify her stance against Tom's impending storm? As Sarah prepared to rise to these new challenges, she couldn't help but wonder, was she ready for whatever lay ahead? The cold morning light brought clarity, but the anticipation of conflict clung to the air, hinting that a reckoning was on the horizon. The sun broke over the horizon, casting a golden hue across Sarah's room, but its warmth failed to penetrate the chill in her heart. The revelations she anticipated from her meeting with Jack loomed like clouds, heavy and pregnant with possibilities. She slid out of bed and dressed without thinking, her mind racing through every potential outcome. Downstairs, the aroma of brewed coffee filled the air, yet the warmth seemed distant as she sipped. Each gulp felt like trying to channel strength from deep within, a feeble attempt to gather the courage needed for the day ahead. As she prepared to leave, she caught a glimpse of herself in the mirror, disheveled, yet resolute. The reflection revealed a woman who was not the same Sarah from weeks past. She had evolved from being reactive to proactive. The office welcomed her with its usual cacophony of ringing phones and whispered exchanges, but today it felt different, charged, almost electric. She could sense the murmur of anticipation, a collective preparation for the oncoming storm. As she gathered her team in the conference room, Sarah positioned herself at the helm of the table, supremely aware of their eyes upon her. Today, we're not just preparing for a proposal, she began, her voice steady and assertive. We're cementing our foothold in this company. Tom's tactics may be manipulative, but we will meet aggression with resilience and facts. With each point she articulated, a spark ignited amongst her colleagues, driving home the urgency of strategic collaboration. She shared insights gathered from her analysis, and encouraged them to develop their own counternarrative stories that would turn Tom's tactics back on themselves. Their enthusiasm grew, morphing into tenacity with each suggestion voiced. Let us talk about our strengths, she proposed, hoping to weave an emotional tapestry of confidence. What are our unique abilities, and how can we showcase them? Each of you brings something vital to this team. As they deliberated, Sarah noticed something shift within herself. This wasn't just about fending off Tom. this was about embracing her full potential as a leader. Her motivation pulsed through the room not only through words but through their collective resolve. No longer was she just defending against an adversary, they were on the offense, sharpening their skills and aiming for success. Suddenly, her phone buzzed with the incoming message. Jack had responded, asking to meet earlier than anticipated. A quiver of nerves shot through her, a blend of apprehension and excitement as she considered what crucial insights he might offer. She couldn't shake off the notion that this meeting would be a pivotal moment, a decisive factor in her tactics against Tom. As the team wrapped up their brainstorming session, a heightened sense of camaraderie surrounded them, an unmistakable bond forged through mutual purpose. This was what Sarah had endeavored to cultivate, a powerful network ready to rise irrespective of obstacles. After the meeting, Sarah absorbed the feedback from her team and took a moment to collect herself. She knew she had to step into Jack's shadows, confront her apprehensions, and unravel the past that still haunted both her and Tom. Yet, uncertainty lay heavy in the air. What if Jack didn't have the answers? What if he ignited new fears rather than quelling old ones? Stepping out of the office, Sarah embraced the brisk air. It jolted her into alertness. Emotions wavered between dread and exhilaration as she headed to the cafe. The stakes were rising, and with them, her resolve solidified. As she approached the rendezvous point, the familiar shadows of her past mingled with the urgency of the present. She felt both the weight of expectations and the thrill of possibilities buoying her forward. Soon, she would face Jack, and soon, they would plunge into a conversation that could either bolster her newfound strength or unravel layers she wasn't prepared to confront. What awaited her in the unfolding narrative of her corporate life? Would unlocking the truth bring her empowerment, or would it thieve the very ground she stood on? In that moment of profound uncertainty, she took a deep breath, bracing for the encounter that threatened to reshape everything. As Sarah entered the cafe, anticipation bubbled beneath her surface. The aroma of coffee enveloped her, providing a grounding distraction from the swirling thoughts racing through her mind. Jack was already seated at a corner table, his fingers anxiously tapping against the ceramic mug. For a fleeting moment, Sarah hesitated, her heart skipping at the reminder of their complicated past. Yet, this meeting could provide the clarity she desperately needed. "Hey, Jack," she greeted as she slid into the chair across from him. "Sarah," he said, his tone laced with an edge of caution. "Thanks for reaching out. I didn't expect to hear from you again." The tension between them was palpable, but Sarah recognized this was a chance to bridge old gaps and sharpen her understanding of the challenges that lay ahead. "I know we haven't spoken for a while, but things at work are shifting," she began, setting the tone for their conversation. "I need your insight about Tom and the way he operates. I'm on a path to challenge the favoritism in our company, and I can't help but feel his influence is still looming." Jack's eyes flickered with surprise, as if he hadn't anticipated her words. "You're taking a stand against Tom?" he asked, genuine curiosity evident in his voice. "Yes," she replied confidently, feeling the warmth of ambition ignite within her. "But I need to learn more about his strategies. The more I understand, the better I can prepare myself and my team for what's to come." He leaned back, considering her, and Sarah observed the tension dissipate slightly. "Tom is good, Sarah. He's been exploiting weaknesses and manipulating narratives for years. If you push back, you will face serious consequences." "I'm aware of that," she replied, steeling her resolve. "But I'm not just standing alone anymore. My colleagues are ready to challenge him and demand change." Jack leaned in, grudging admiration softening his features. "That's the real game changer. Strength in numbers is powerful. But you must strategize carefully. Tom will retaliate, probably in ways that could undermine the backing you've built." Their conversation flowed seamlessly, fueled by insights and constructive strategies. Jack shared anecdotes from his own past experiences, how Tom thrived on intimidation, harnessed connections, and played the victim when necessary. For the first time, Sarah felt equipped with a broadened understanding of the field, crystallizing the realization that knowledge was her strongest ally. By the end of their coffee meeting, the initial tension that enveloped their exchange gave way to mutual respect. With newfound clarity, Sarah walked back to the office, her steps purposeful. She was prepared, fortified by Jack's insights and her colleagues' support, ready to confront whatever storm awaited her. In the days that followed, Sarah rallied her team, determined to cultivate the camaraderie that had begun to blossom between them. They worked tirelessly to refine their proposals, establishing an equitable performance review system that would emphasize meritocracy, inclusion, and transparency. Then came the day of the ultimate confrontation. The board meeting launched, the room filled with familiar faces and an air of apprehension. Sarah took her place at the front, her heart steady as she began to present the team's recommendations. As she spoke, she could sense Tom's scrutiny, his demeanor strikingly more defensive than ever. "Just to be clear," Sarah stated, voice unwavering as she set her gaze on Tom. "We are urging our leadership to promote a culture based on fairness and transparency. Our proposals are not just suggestions but a necessary evolution in how we operate." Tom's face turned a shade of crimson. "Do we really need to disrupt a system that has been effective, Sarah? This is risky for everyone." "No, Tom," Sarah pressed back. "What's truly risky is maintaining a status quo that overlooks talent in favor of connections." A ripple of murmurs cascaded through the room, nodding heads of colleagues slowly transforming into allies. They were no longer members of a fractured team but a unified front against a legacy of favoritism. "Your suggestions, while fascinating, lack concrete foresight," Tom countered, his voice dripping with sarcasm aimed to discredit their efforts. But Sarah readied herself, revealing the meticulously researched data behind her proposals. "What we lack in tradition, we make up for in evidence. The most effective organizations harness a diverse range of voices. If we want to thrive, we must evolve." A moment of silence followed, the weight of her words hanging in the air like a clarion call. She had not only confronted Tom, she had positioned herself as an authority in the conversation, a leader unwilling to cower. By the conclusion of the meeting, Sarah walked out of the room, fully aware that she had crossed an essential threshold. Her colleagues followed, each recognition glimmering in their eyes, a shared understanding that they had collectively risen. As confidence flowed through them, the storm clouds of uncertainty began to part, revealing the potential for a more equitable workplace. In the weeks that followed, Sarah experienced the outcomes of her courage, an ever-evolving company culture dedicated to meritocracy. She stepped powerfully into a newly established leadership role, guiding her team with compassion, conviction, and knowledge. The transformation was whole. No longer the hesitant employee shadowed by her insecurities, Sarah emerged as a represented figure of resilience, having redefined not just her career but the environment around her. The journey had demanded every ounce of her strength, but it paved the way for deeper recognition of her capabilities and validated her voice amid chaos. More importantly, Sarah's journey was a reminder that the most profound victories ensued from standing resolute, that true leadership was born not from privilege, but from unwavering integrity and the courage to affirm one's worth. As she looked around the office, a surge of satisfaction swelled within her. She had successfully reshaped not only her professional landscape but also her identity. With newfound confidence, she embraced each day, knowing that she was not merely surviving in this corporate world but thriving within it. This was a victory she had earned. Now, more than ever, she understood the importance of this moment. This is where it all belongs, the connection to her past, the fight for recognition, and a future ripe with possibilities. So if you want to see more transformative stories and powerful breakthroughs, you need to subscribe now. This is the moment to show your support and leave a like to fuel the algorithm. Comment below with your thoughts on Sarah's journey and share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. Don't wait even one more second.